So this is about cryptography, and it's in front of us. When people need to secretly store or communicate messages, they turn to cryptography. The relation to math is then logic that's behind it and using math in order to make a cipher and decipher it. Cryptography involves using techniques to obscure a message so outsiders cannot read the message. It is typically split into two steps. I just mentioned it: encryption, which the message is obscured, and decryption, which the original message is recovered from the obscured form. And this is also a free textbook here, LibreText Mathematics. This one here is our textbook here, Logic. I have to see how much actually plays in here for the cryptography that I'm about to teach here. And this one here is the Wikipedia article on that, basically the same thing. And then what I thought of first is, let's look at anagrams. And then we continue from there. All right, so here's an anagram. Anagram is a word or phrase formed by rearranging the letters of a different word or phrase, typically using all the original letters exactly once. So here's one example here: silent, and you rearrange them. Listen, there you go. All right, I'm going to go back to this one here. Otherwise, we keep seeing this here all the time. So I asked Chat to help me with a lesson plan here. So I basically said, hey, give me anagram. And so it defined it. And then, I forgot to highlight this part here. Let's do that right now. It's like blue when I do that. There we go. And then I ask it, give me the history, purpose, and importance of anagrams. So the history goes all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans, and they used it for literary purposes, for example. In the medieval and Renaissance periods, during the Middle Ages, Renaissance, anagrams were popular among scholars and mystics. They were often used to encode messages or a form of wordplay in literature. And this is actually where I'm coming from, that there are some famous anagrams from the Renaissance period that I'm going to share with you very soon here. Modern usage, yes, have become popular in puzzles, games, and as a form of entertainment. Cryptography, anagrams have been used in cryptography to encode messages. Kind of repeating myself here, right? Because it's kind of like already my third thing talking about cryptography and anagrams. All right, then relation to cryptography. So again, here in ancient medieval times, anagrams were sometimes used to encode messages. Basically the same thing here. Cipher techniques, while not as complex as modern cryptographic methods, anagrams represent an early form of cipher. They demonstrate the basic principle of transforming information to obscure its meaning. All right. And let's actually try a few. So here we got some short words. Cinema. I'm going to take this one here. And I'm going to put it in here. Let's see what we get. Actually, I might like the one better. Actually, it gives me back what I was looking for, Iceman. So cinema is an anagram of Iceman. And yeah, I cannot get rid of these advertisements here. When I put it here, I'll probably get the same thing. There we go. It's one of the first ones, cinema. Amino nut. I kind of like this one here. Let's see what we get. By the way, these anagram generators, they have a tough time with going beyond one word. So we'll see. And there it is right in front of us, mountain. So as I said, I kind of like that. Let's try some longer words. Moonstera. Also one that I like. I like cinema because I like them all. That's why I chose them. So there we go. And that was the very first one, astronomer. Pretty cool. The classroom. I know it's two words, and it's okay. It usually puts it in together to one word. Let's see, schoolmaster. There we go. It finds the one that I'm aiming for right away. I found these somewhere. Okay, I didn't make these up. This one here, you would have to know some of the greatest actors. He's pretty old now, but I think he's still making movies. So Old West action. And go a little bit down, and there he is, Clint Eastwood. Is that still making films? He's in his 90s right now. All right, let's see. The cipher doesn't have to make sense. So you might have seen there that, well, it has to be another word. Well, that's true for a true anagram, but if you really want to cipher something, encrypt something, you cannot really make a sensible word out of it. So you have to do something like this. This one doesn't exist. Let's see what this one is. Can you guess it? I faintly remember. Let's see how far down it is. There. Neat. Okay. Let's see. How about this one? Oh, I know what it is. Do you see the word time in there? There we go. Time, or actually item too. How about this one here? Can you see that one? Oops, there we go. That's what I'm seeing in my office. And there it is. All right, so good. Now, let's take some words and actually scramble them and see if they can be deciphered. So I'm going to take the word bookshelf and put it here. Looks like this advertisement here is talking about books. So then I'm going to take one of these here. Whoa. Ooh, I have to get that dot out. There we go. I'm going to take, actually I took that earlier when I practiced. So I'm going to take this one. So totally scrambled, right? Doesn't make any sense. Let's see if this one is able to get us bookshelf back. Yes, there it is, right there, bookshelf. And the other one, probably too. Scramble, and there it is, the very first one, bookshelf. I'm going to take computer screen. Let's see what happens here. There we go. Let's see. Oh, actually, I meant to go in here. Oops, might have already compromised one of them here. Let's see what happens. Okay, to do something. Oh, there we go. All right. Let's take this one here. Let's see. And yeah, we've kind of compromised it, right? Maybe it doesn't remember. I don't think this one is AI. So let's see. All right, so I took this totally scrambled here, and then we go down here, and it makes words out of it. And can we see it? And there it is. And if you look at all these others here, this is the only sensible one, right? Computer screen. All right, let's go a little further here. So as a means to claim priority of discoveries, that's where I'm coming from. And in fact, it gives me some famous examples, at least for me, because I'm teaching physics and astronomy and math. So I'm familiar with a number of them. And this is the person that I was thinking of, Galileo Galilei, who used anagrams. So he lived about 400 years ago, early, I think born 1564, died born 1564, died in 1642. I think I got it right. And then Robert Hooke lived 100 years later, so in the mid-17th century. And the other one I was thinking of was Kepler. We're going to come across him here very soon. Importance is underlined here. Intellectual property. Anagrams served as an early form of intellectual property protection, allowing scientists to safeguard their work while maintaining the ability to claim credit. Okay, I'm going to explain that once we actually get there. I put a few more here and really came up with Galileo and Kepler again, and then actually Huygens. So what they were trying to do here is they have made a discovery, and now they make something and then totally encode it with all these letters. I mean, they just scramble the letters around, and in this case, totally alphabetically. And therefore, they would send this now to fellow scientists at the time and say, hey, I have discovered something. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but what I'm saying is I want the priority. I was the first one to have discovered this. And you have to acknowledge it, and you're my witness. And it would be pretty tough for us to decipher that. So it was a pretty good safeguard against that. All right, against cheating, so on. Let's see, there's a few more on here. I'm going to skip these. And what's going to happen with these here, we're saying here, Huygens and Hooke and Kepler and Galilei, back in the 17th century, what I just gave you, there's an Italian in there, there's a German in there, there's a couple of a Dutch and Englishmen in here. They're all published in Latin. Okay, so here we have some Latin words. Let's give these a try. I scrambled these before. So I'm going to take this one here and let's see what we get. I don't think it matters really if I use this one or the other one. All right, let's see what happens. Oops, that's not true. That's not going to work because I have to use the Latin one. So, it says it found 2 Latin anagrams. And this is where it comes from, the word agricola, which simply translates as farmer. It's one of the first words to learn in Latin. And you can see the word agra in there, from which the word acre, so field, derives. And the culture, as in agriculture, of course, that means to cultivate or to grow. So that's the connection here, agricola, which is a farmer, and then agriculture. All right, let's try this one here. Yeah, that's right. I have to use the Latin anagram maker. There we go. So this word is brevis. I'm not sure how it connects to dactyl. In any case, that's the word brief. So brevis, Latin, means simply brief or short. All right, I do remember this one here. There we go. So difficilis, which obviously means, gonna get rid of these. There we go. Which obviously means difficult. So Latin difficilis. English has a lot of Latin words in it. English has a huge overlap with my native German, but it also has a lot of Latin words that actually German doesn't have so many. So English in that sense is quite richer. And I chose some words here that are, even though they are Latin, you can recognize these. All right, that's a pretty long, whoa, okay, that's not going to work. I'm not sure what happened here. Let's see. All right, so there's nothing there. Let's see. Yeah, did I make a mistake? Okay, it doesn't like that. I'm still in the Latin one, right? Huh. Did I not check that before? Interesting. What I actually was looking for was circumferentia, which means circumference. So in a circle. All right, so that one didn't work. Let's see. Okay. So carnivora, as in carnivore. So carne means meat, and vora there, the word devour comes from that. So an animal that devours meat, a meat eater, carnivore, right? All right, this one here, I'm not sure if this one really worked. I don't remember. So split up into 2 words, which it is. Oh, it might just work. No, it didn't do it. That would be actually carpe diem, which is seize the day. So some of these anagram makers, generators, solvers, they have problem with 2 words. All right, so let's go over here to Galileo, Kepler, and 2 anagrams. This is from a person with the name of Judge Starling. I'm not sure if that's his real name, but anyway, he wrote this up here, and it's one of many sources where you can find these. But let me tell you just a little bit about Galileo and Kepler. So they lived both around the year 1600. Galileo, he didn't invent the telescope, but right after it was invented by, I think, Lippershey, who was Danish, I believe. he improved on it and made lots of astronomical discoveries. So the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus. He discovered sunspots by simply looking at it. That actually made him blind. So never ever look with a telescope at the sun. He didn't know that, I guess. So over time he got blind from that. And then physics and motion. So he's kind of like also the father of modern physics and so on. Johannes Kepler himself is famous for formulating the laws of orbital motion, is what I call them. And here they are. One of them is the orbits and so on. And the two communicated with each other. Kepler lived mostly, he was from Germany, he lived mostly in Bohemia, in Prague, which is now Czech Republic, while Galileo lived in northern Italy. They had the Alps in between. They actually never met. It would have been too complicated to get from one place to another one, but they communicated. So that's a little bit of introduction of these here. And by the way, I asked Chat to make me a drawing here. And if they had hypothetically met right there, it would be. And then I asked Chat, hey, who's who? And it said, because when we look at actually portraits, they look, with their beard, they look similar. And it says, I can't identify who is who in this image, but typically Galileo is depicted with a beard and holding a telescope. Okay, they both have a beard in this drawing here. I would go, okay, this is Galileo here, and he is near the telescope, and Kepler is doing some calculations here. By the way, in this particular drawing that it gave me here, it put in some kind of Easter egg, something that doesn't belong in a drawing from 400 years ago. All right. Anyway, let's look at what Galileo said. So on 2 occasions, Galileo announced discoveries he had made with the telescope by mailing anagrams, scrambled text, to Kepler. The first run read this. So no, that's not a word, But so he just scrambled the letters totally from whatever he wanted to express in order to keep the priority, but keep it as a secret so no one could steal it from him. If he just had outright said, hey, this is what it is, and someone else could have said, yeah, I published that last year. No, you didn't, because here it is. It's scrambled. Well, give it a little bit of time. And then Galileo says, hey, that's what it is. That's what it meant. I discovered it. So that's why they did it that way. All right. So Kepler tried to decipher this one here, and Kepler came up with something. He said, here it says, Kepler would serve as his expert witness. He unscrambled the anagram, but he did it wrong. He said, salve umbistineum geminatum Martia polis. And I think we can see the word Martia here, which means Mars. Okay. And this one here Mars has 2 moons. And that's not what it was. I can show you Mars has 2 moons. I'm going to go down here a little bit. There we go. Yes, this is a photo from, 2024 from an amateur astronomer. And Mars moons, they're so small, they're captured asteroids. They could not have been observed in the year 1600. It actually took until about 1880 by Asaph Hall, an American in fact, it says so here, 1877, by Asaph Hall, an American astronomer, to discover them. So that's not what it was. So the original one, again, the scrambled word here, did not produce this one here. That was the wrong one. But hey, he came up with something interesting, even though grammatically it says here it was incorrect. But what it should have been is this one here, altissimum. That means kind of like altitude, right? Planetum, ooh, there's the word planet. Tergeminum observavi. Ooh, observed, right? I have observed the highest planet to be triplets. That's what it says here. I'm not sure. I guess Tergeminium means triplets. Okay, the highest planet, what is that? Well, it's the furthest one out at the time of Galileo, which would be Saturn. Okay, and what does this here mean, triplets? Well, let's look over here. This one here is Jupiter, and it has 4 moons. And that's also one of Galileo's discoveries. These are his drawings from one of the books that he published. So you can see 4 moons, somewhat once in a while, every few nights, one of them is actually behind or in front of Jupiter, so you cannot see them. So that's Jupiter. So he observed Saturn, and this is what he saw. So he thought that it has two moons, just like the four moons he's discovered for Jupiter. He discovered two moons, two ears on both sides, triplets. Wow, cool. He couldn't fathom this. I mean, that there would be a planet with a ring around. He had just discovered Jupiter's moons. And now it's, well, Saturn also has a couple of moons, right? So he was actually off by that, but he didn't know. His telescope just was not good enough to do that. All right, so here's the other one that he put to Kepler and other people in Europe too. This one actually he tried to make words out of, right? Haec immatura e meam frustra leguntur. Oi actually is not a word at all, but he needed to put the OY in there. And that translates, these immature ones have already been read in vain by me, which doesn't mean anything. Kepler interpreted this anagram here as macula rufa in Jove est juratur matem. Jove means Jupiter. Est means it is, right? And let's see, juratur, that has something to do with gyroscope, so something that's turning, okay? And this is how it translates into English. There's a red spot in Jupiter which rotates mathematically, but he couldn't do the whole thing math here. It was wrong anyway. Jupiter does have a red spot, but again, the telescope wasn't good enough. It was actually discovered back around like 50 years after both of them had died, around 1670 or so. So he interpreted incorrectly. What it should have been is this one here. Cintiae figuras amulatur mata amorum. This one here sounds like the word love, amor. Figuras, well, figure, right? And Cynthia apparently is another word for the moon. It's not only Luna is the moon, but Cynthia is also moon. The mother of love, which is the moon, imitates the figures. I'm sorry, that's not true. The mother of love imitates the figures of Cynthia, imitates the figures of the moon, which means the moon's phases. And the mother of love is Venus. And in fact, that's what happened right here. So this is what Galileo observed, and ask an astronomer, put a telescope on Venus, and depending on the time and date that you have, depending on the date that you have throughout the year, you might see one phase or the other. All right, so that's what it should have been. Okay, that Venus has phases that Kepler misinterpreted. All right. Now, this particular author says, well, I find the story terribly, this is not me saying, but this is the author of this little article here. I find the story terribly unsatisfying and I have trouble believing as is. The story simply defies logic and so on. It is actually, there are letters that show that Kepler tried it that way, and he accidentally came up with a couple of things that, well, were accidentally correct, even though that's not what Galileo meant. And they were later discovered to be right. So it's kind of a coincidence, but he probably also came up with other wrong predictions that actually turned out to be wrong. Okay. Last one that I have here is, I have two more. So here, this one is Robert Hooke. He put a short one here. I don't think that's going to work in the Latin one that we have here. The others wouldn't work anyway. Let's see, which one is it? Where'd it go? This one. There we go. Yeah, it doesn't do it. So this one here is also Latin, utensio sig vis, which translates as the extensions to the force. Hooke's law is simply this law of the spring. You put twice the weight on a spring, it extends twice as much. That's all it means. That's what he discovered. These kind of like almost self-evident truths had to be discovered by someone. And Huygens himself, he lived a few years. Hooke also lived kind of like mid-17th century. Huygens around the same time. He was Dutch. He made this long anagram here. And again, our anagram solver here cannot decipher this one here. But when you decode it, you come up with this one here: annulo singitur tenuo plano nusquam coherente ad eclipticam inclinato. Eclipticam means the ecliptic, and this here means inclined. Let's see what the rest means. It is surrounded by a thin, flat ring, nowhere touching, inclined to the ecliptic. And what he is referring to are actually Saturn's rings. These are from 1694. This is from Huygens' book. So just 100 years later, the telescope was actually at this point good enough to actually give this kind of image of Saturn with its rings. And then astronomers were puzzled again. Okay, we just discovered moons around some of the planets. In fact, Titan, one of the Saturn moons, was also discovered. And now there are these rings. Boy, we're really mind-boggled of what's going on here. I think all these letters that you see here, they're just descriptors here on here. Also, what Huygens did is he put the moon, you see the word Luna here, and Telos. I had to look that up. Telos is another word for Earth. So these are size comparisons. So notice that he knew, well, more than 300 years ago, that Saturn was a whole lot bigger than Earth and Moon. All right. Then I said, okay, I said to Chad, okay, these were 17th century natural philosophers. When did anagrams stop to be used? Okay. And because I was hinting at why did they fall out of favor, and that's what it says here: fell out of favor for claiming superiority, developed more formalized and transparent methods for publishing and verifying discoveries, so scientific journals, peer review and verification, intellectual property laws. So people who made discoveries were better protected, and so they didn't have to use these anagrams anymore. But of course, for other cryptography, well, we'll be looking at other things beyond anagrams. I think that was the last thing I wanted to mention here. Yes, it was. All right. I know that was quite a lecture that I gave here.